Hi, very good morning to our Dr. Hayati, Dr. Fazila, and my fellow audience. I'm the moderator. My name is Niva, and I'd like to introduce my panelists before I introduce our topic first. This is Ms. Shoki, the industrial expert, Mr. Brian, the policy maker, Ms. Amira, the consumer, and Ms. Marlisa as the academician. So our topic today would be recycled plastics into the streamline of food contact materials. Before we begin, I would like to ask consumer, Ms. Mira, what do you think about recycling? In your opinion, what is recycling?
Okay, first of all, thank you to the moderator, Niva. And as a consumer, I think the recycled plastic is something that we use it again for its original purpose or for other function. Let me take for example this water bottle. And this plastic bottle is filled with the mineral water firstly, and then after it finish, we will refill it again with the other substances like detergents or oils. So this plastic bottle is recycled by using other substances, but same bottle. That's what I understand with the recycled plastic.
I believe what you are actually referring to is not recycling, however it is reusing the material for the same or another purpose. And recycling is actually a reprocessing of material into a new form. And recycling actually have three types, which is the primary recycling, secondary recycling, and also tertiary recycling. Let me explain all of three of this. First is the primary recycling. Primary recycling is actually pre-consumer materials which has not reached the consumer yet. However, for the secondary recycling, it's actually undergo physical breakdown and form it into a new material. Just imagine this paper as a plastic. We melt it down and then we reform it back into a new shape, into a new items. And for the tertiary recycling, it is basically undergo a breakdown of molecules or polymer inside of the plastic, like this, into a small pieces or into a monomer, and then we process it to become a new item. So that is what actually recycling means.
So I think it's a very thin line to differentiate between recycling and reuse, and I guess our consumer here is well aware of it. What does that recycling means really now? And also, since there are stages in recycling stage, like primary, secondary, and tertiary, I'd like to ask you: is it common to use the recycled plastics in the food industries for food contact materials?
Well, the recycled plastic actually is commonly used in non-food contact materials. For example, the pipes, carpets, bags, the furniture like tables, chairs, and even the clothing like t-shirt, jeans, and jacket are produced from the recycled plastics.
I also believe that recycled plastics can be used for food contact materials. When I say food contact materials, what I actually mean are actually things that you can encounter in daily life, just like this. Convenient, I just got them downstairs. So basically, these things, what they have in common, they have this logo, which is by the EFSA. Basically, anything with this logo shows that it's a food contact material. So these are just examples of what you can encounter in daily life. But we're talking about recycled plastics here. So whether recycled plastics are used for food contact materials, in my opinion, it is possible, because if you look in another country, not in Malaysia, they have this logo. So this logo here shows that the material is made from recycled PET plastic. PET means type 1. Yeah. So anything with this logo is basically made from recycled plastic. But of course, in Japan right now, it's mostly for polyester clothing, like you said, although some might be found for beverage containers. So it's possible, but maybe it's not as common. Yeah.
Since it's slightly not common and the recycled plastic in food contact materials is emerging right now, I think our consumer would be concerned about the safety of recycled plastic into the food contact materials. Do you think so?
Yes, as a consumer, I think the safety is the most important part for the recycled plastic, because as we know that as a consumer, we don't know where the plastic it comes from, the sources of the plastic. it might be come from the landfills or the dustbin. So the plastic might be contaminated with many substances which can cause any effect to the recycled plastic. And also it is more important if it involved with the food contact material. That's what I concern the most.
Oh, that leads me to a very good question on where do you usually get your sources for the recycled plastics, since it is concerned about the safety?
We will collect the recycled plastic from the recycling center. So where does the recycled plastic come from? At first, the consumer will bring the used plastic to the redemption center to sell for money, and then the used plastic will be compact into a bale, which will be transported to the recycling center. So I know that what the consumer concern is the safety of the recycled plastics, but don't worry, at the recycling center, the bale will be washed, sorted, and heated and reprocessed into the recycled plastics. So all this process will help to reduce the contaminants in the recycled plastic to a level that is low enough to be used for its intent purposes safely.
Actually, from what Ms. Ye explained, I remember one video from the YouTube where a country like Germany, they used to do their recycling process by asking a person or an agent to collect the plastic from house to house and then send it to the recycling center. So that what make I'm more curious is about the process of recycled plastic, where the most important is sorting part, which is more critical part in the recycled plastics. So anyone can give more explanation about it?
I can explain about that. So since sorting, it's true that sorting process is very important. As the factory, they have to ensure that they separate all of the plastic according to their types. This is in order for them to produce a high-end product for recycled plastic. And besides that, sorting process also is important, as they need to eliminate and discard all of the foreign materials that may be included during the collecting of recycled materials, and this will help to not for the foreign material to not interfere during the recycle processing, especially for the food contact materials.
It seems sorting is very important and it involves a lot of processes, and I am quite concerned about the cost now. Is it very expensive to use the recycled plastics undergoing all those processes by stages, or is it expensive to use the virgin plastics?
Well, actually, it is hard to say that which types of plastic need the higher cost, because the cost of the virgin plastic is not always more expensive than the recycled plastic. The virgin plastic is produced from the petroleum, but the price of oil is fluctuated in recent years. So as the price of oil drops, the cost for making the virgin plastic will be reduced and thus become less expensive than the recycled plastics. So since the process for making the recycled plastic needs a certain amount of energy and efforts.
I think petroleum is a non-renewable energy source, is it? And it is depleting in years. I guess to maintain it, recycled plastics would be more sustainable in future to be used. Is it true, Miss Lisa?
Yes, it's true, since plastic is a petroleum-based product, and as we continue to use this, it might reduce our petroleum in the future. Thus, by having this recycled plastic, we can help to save our petroleum, and also we can also save our environment, as we all know that plastic is not easily to dispose and and it will end up the plastic that we are using right now will end up in the landfill and the ocean, which is not good for our environment, also to us human. So for me, recycled plastic, especially for food contact materials, can be a good new way for us to protect our natural resources.
Dumping the plastics in ocean reminds me about a video I saw in Facebook regarding the microplastics. Microplastics are commonly found in the tap water in US right now, and also in the oysters, that is seafood in ocean. I guess it would be harmful if we consume those oysters that consume those microplastics, which harms the environment as well as us. Do you have anything to comment?
Talking about that video, I saw it too, and it's quite shocking because if the oysters can accumulate such microplastics, where did it come from? They live in the ocean, so it must have come from the ocean water. And how did the microplastics end up in the ocean water? So I guess it must be from the plastics that you mentioned earlier. They either end up in the landfill or in the oceans. And somehow or other, even though they don't degrade in a short time, they take probably 500 years to 1,000 years to degrade completely. But at the same time, it shows that there's an issue of microplastics. And if they can end up in the ocean water, who knows, they might end up in our own drinking water. And that's not something we want. So that's why, rather than let the plastics go all the way to the ocean, why not recycle it so that it doesn't end up in the ocean? So that's why I believe even many governments, many authorities, they, especially the FDA and the FSA, they have guidelines to promote recycling of plastics as food contact materials.
Speaking about the regulations and guidelines, I guess since our consumer here is very concerned about our safety, I guess the regulation and guidelines could have any manipulations regarding the safety concern on using the recycled plastics into the food contact materials.
Rest assured, the authorities do have the consumers in mind. That's why they have these guidelines. But of course, let's look a bit closer first. Malaysia. So if you look at Malaysia, maybe we have the closest one will be the Food Regulations, 1985, Regulation 32. It does talk about food packaging in general. And the word recycled does appear in the regulation. But if you look at it closely, I believe that it's actually more on reuse, as mentioned earlier. So it's not really related to recycling the plastic. So we have to look at other countries and what are the other countries doing. So I think a good example here would be the US, especially the FDA. So the FDA has guidelines, as I mentioned earlier, and in these guidelines, it's basically available on the internet. And anyone in the industry, for example, even if Ms. Seok Yi wants to produce food contact material using recycled plastic, so she has to submit an application to the FDA. So what should be in this application? I'll try to summarize it. It's quite long. So basically, there will be three main things. Okay. First, they need to state what kind of recycling process are they using. Is it primary, secondary, or tertiary? Usually, there's not much concern if it's primary recycling, but there is a concern if there's a secondary or tertiary recycling because they're using post-consumer material. Post-consumer means that they could have put oil, detergent, who knows, contaminants basically. So then how can they ensure the safety? So the second part in the application will be the surrogate test. So to put it simply, surrogate test means they are going to simulate the real life situation. Okay, imagine that the consumer contaminate the plastic. So we're going to use virgin resin. It's like original resin. So it's clean. And then we purposely contaminate it with a certain contaminant. So the guideline already lists out what kind of contaminants that they should use for the test. A good example would be chloroform, because many detergents actually use chloroform. So for example, I'm going to contaminate this virgin resin with chloroform purposely. And then I'm going to bring it, put it through the recycling process, and in the end I'll have recycled plastic as a food contact material. So I have to test the final product. What is the level of contaminant in that final product? So if it's less than or equal to 0.5 ppb, then we deem that risk to be negligible. Means that even if all of that 0.5 ppb migrates into the food, we think that the risk is negligible and safe for consumers.
It is a very interesting, detailed explanation, yet complicated. I'm quite worried about our consumer here, whether she understands or not, because it is important for her to understand regarding the safety of food, recycled plastics into food contact materials. Do you understand, Ms. Mira?
Actually, it's quite complicated for me to understand because as a consumer, we don't have any basic knowledge about the recycled plastic. But what can I summarize from what Mr. Brian explained is there is a test called surrogate test, and the test have limit for the chemical contaminants, where the limits for the contaminants is 0.5 parts per billion ppb to consider it safe to consume. So that's what I understand for what Mr. Brian said.
I'm glad that you understand. Okay, so moving on, I'd like to ask you, since there are contaminants in the recycled plastic, how do you usually handle those contaminants when you are recycling the plastics?
Well, we will control at the source of the plastic materials we use to make the recycled plastics. So the source of the plastic material may come from the food contact material or the non-food contact material like pipes, detergent, and so on. So we will ensure that the source of the plastic material we use is coming from the food contact material.
So you are controlling on the source itself. Okay, then I'm quite curious on a statement that paper can be recycled into 4 to 6 times. Are there anything like that, similar as that for plastics, that plastic can be recycled for several times, or can it be recycled only once? Anyone?
Let me explain this. As for plastic, it can be recycled for 7 to 9 times. However, the 7 to 9 times recycling process will be more on the primary and secondary types, recycling types. This is due to the reason that the plastic contain fiber, which will shorten up through each recycling process, and this is why the reason why we can see that recycled plastic have lower in quality compared to the plastic that is made from the virgin resin.
So I guess we are at the end of our discussion now. Thank you for all the panelists and my listeners. So I'd like to summarize what we have discussed throughout the 15 minutes. So actually, recycled plastic is have 3 stages to be conducting the stages: primary, secondary, and tertiary. Which are secondary and tertiary is becoming the main one. And our main concerns in recycled plastics to be in food contact materials would be environment, safe, and cost. So I think it's a responsibility of all the parties to be involved in making the recycled plastics to be safe, to be safe, cost efficient, and environmental friendly to be used, and gain the trust of consumers to be used in the food contact materials. That's all from us. Thank you so much.